Hey, kid. Yeah, you. Over here. Over here. Hey, you. You're that one with all those gardening videos, right? Yeah, I knew that was you. I saw you. Yeah, I saw you on YouTube. Hey, man, I got the stuff right here. I got the best stuff. Make your garden grow real good. Yeah, here, you try this. Oh, come on. Just a little bit. You try it once. I promise you'll be back. Nah, I'm good, man. I got my own plans. Yeah, he'll be back. They always come back. I've been slinging this stuff all day long.
Well, hello there, good people. Hi, it's Jason with Green Country Agroforestry here. We tried a little something different earlier today, so you saw that bit there. I hope you liked it. Instead of me trying to fumble with the guitar and play something that may or may not wind up getting us demonetized if I do it accurately, I figured I'll do something a little bit different. We'll give you a little lead in and let people find their seats. But that was a little clip from a previous video that we did a long time ago. Created this character. I called him Carl, Chemical Carl. He's the guy that stands on the corner like the corner boy, slinging the dope. But what he's got is our little bags of fertilizer. And the idea of fertilizer being an addictive problem, a chemical addiction, is a fairly serious one. We're going to bring up a couple things tonight. We're going to revisit what's going on in Jones, Oklahoma. I'm going to play a trailer for a movie that I helped to pay for, called Jones Plantation for you. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the problems with chemical farming, the difference between glyphosate and aminopyrrolid when it comes to herbicides and what they do, and maybe whatever else happens to come up. So, hi! Let me go ahead and remove that little trailer bit there. I hope you liked it. See who we got in the house tonight. Mary's here, Carolyn's here, Lori's here, Vicky's here. Thank you, Mary. So let me see. I'm going to share something with you here. This is the fundraiser for Emily Rusicki. Right there. If you see that up on the screen, let me move this so you guys can see it a little bit better. This is the GoFundMe page for Rusicki Farms. Now, Rusicki is down in Jones, Oklahoma, and they had 2 acres worth of produce that was sprayed with what looks to me to be glyphosate, from the way those are squash plants there, the way they've wilted down. I'll explain why I believe it's glyphosate and not aminopyrrolid here in a moment. But of course, you can see what they're using for a mulch there. Looks like they've got maybe a pine straw or wood chip mulch in between their walkways. So that's not going to be something that's got aminopyrrolid in it. They're using that landscaping fabric for weed control, which ordinarily I don't agree with. But what they're doing here is a mass operation producing large amounts of produce. They have about 100 different families that are on their CSA program, which means every month these families pay them a certain amount of money. It's probably around $100 a family to get a box of produce. Obviously, they weren't able to deliver the boxes of produce for this past month. They're going to try to recuperate and get back to the business of selling produce, but they're going to have to do a lot of work, and they're going to have to make a lot of refunds. So that's the reason for the fundraiser. It's a $10,000 goal fundraiser, and I decided that I was going to go ahead and give them all of last month's YouTube revenue, which you can see right down, well, here, right here. There's our donation. Yeah, it's $100. We made 104, and it was 100 that we donated to the GoFundMe, and $5 for a tip. So we actually donated a little bit more than all of last month's revenue. But this is a worthy cause, guys. I would highly recommend people go if they've got the ability and the inclination to help a farming family from going out of business. This is the kind of thing that we all dream of doing, and this is a family that could very, very much use some help. Let me see. Did that show up there? Yes, it did. Okay. That's the link right there for the Ruzicki GoFundMe. So there they are. They've appeared on a couple of different news channels. Let me switch back over here to that view. Hey, look, I'm little in the corner. There you go. So they've appeared on a few news shows so far. They've been talked about by a few other YouTubing channels. As far as I know, I'm the only YouTubing channel that's given an entire month's ad revenue, which isn't much so far. Hopefully, maybe if you guys have YouTube channels out there that watch this and go, I do think maybe I should put my money where my mouth is and help support. There's the link for it. Of course, if you're watching this channel and you watch other YouTube channels that maybe have a little bit more cash flow than we do, you might put the bug in their ear that, hey, there's a little channel over here that's willing to donate a month's worth of ad revenue. Maybe you could at least match them. You don't necessarily have to tell them that a month's ad revenue for us is only about $100. Oh my goodness. So the thing that is different between aminopyrrolid and glyphosate, and I'm going to go ahead and use right now brand names because people are familiar with the brand names for disambiguation. But for the rest of the conversation, I'll be referring to glyphosate as glyphosate and not by the common brand name, because there's more than just one brand of glyphosate. It's found in several different brands. So if people are familiar with Roundup, because that's the big popular formulation, right? It's still glyphosate with water, diluted in spray form. It's convenient, easy. You spray it on the weeds in their sidewalk, it kills the weeds, everybody's happy. Used on the broad scale in agriculture, farmers use glyphosate to kill off weeds in their fields in preparation for planting. They use it to dry in crops, for example, winter wheat, and I guess summer wheat too, for that matter. Barley, oats, all kinds of grains whenever they're ready to harvest. As that wheat plant begins, I'm going to use wheat as the example because I actually am growing a little bit of it, so I'm observing it and watching what it does. As the plant reaches that end of its life cycle, when it's produced the stalk with the seed head is now matured. The plant begins to die, but it doesn't die off all uniformly. Some of it's still green, some of it's mature, and there's a scale in between. But the idea is you want to get that all dried quickly and gathered in and brought in, so you can separate the wheat from the straw and bale the straw and do all that other good stuff. You leave it sitting out in the field too long, you leave the opportunity for mold and mildew to start working its way into the grain head. So the quicker it can dry, the better. What they wound up doing is spraying glyphosate over the wheat field after it's reached that point of maturity, so it will dry quickly. They can gather it all in at once. It's all dried, and they can bring it in and store it. Of course, that means that glyphosate goes into our food supply. I'm not going to go into great detail about what glyphosate does to the human body because I don't have enough personal information about that to really be an effective presenter. So I'll talk more about what it does to the soil. What it does to the soil is rather intriguing. So glyphosate attacks mature plants, not emerging plants. It won't stop a seed from germinating, but it attacks mature plants. It causes them to have a difficulty transmitting energy. It will cause them to wilt down, die, and dry up in a short amount of time. In some cases, it means an increase in ethylene, and that's another reason why some commercial farmers use it, because it will make fruit ripen quickly. And once again, that means we're eating glyphosate whenever we're consuming a lot of stuff from the grocery store. Once again, not going to go into what it does to our bodies. However, based upon what it does to the soil, you can kind of make some inferences to what it may do to the microbiome in our intestines. So, before they started using glyphosate as a herbicide, glyphosate was marketed as an antimicrobial. And at one time, you may have been able to find glyphosate as a component inside your hand soap that we use to wash your hands before you went to go do surgery or dishes or whatever it is that you're doing. But they're using trichlorosan, I think is the new antiseptic that they're putting into all the hand soaps. Glyphosate never did become popular for that use. It became more popular for an herbicide, as an effective herbicide. Fact remains, it's still an antimicrobial. And whenever it comes into contact with the soil, it immediately begins to work killing off microbes. Put a pin in that for a moment, and let's go back up a little bit. And we're going to talk about how healthy plants manage to get nutrients. And I'm going to adjust my camera a little bit because I'm cutting the top of my head off. Hi, everybody. So you got more people in there. If you're just coming in, don't forget to hit that like button. I know you love this channel. You're going to love the information we're putting out. So just go ahead and do it right now. No, do what you want. Anyway, so healthy plants, the way it works is you have a seed, it germinates, puts out a couple first leaves. Those first leaves were included in the seed, part of the initial information packet that you got with all the information that was encoded in that tiny little seed. These two first little leaves contain energy, calories, essentially, sugars, things that the plant can use to metabolize to spur its initial growth. And it needs that because until it starts being able to get in sunlight and water and pull in CO2 and photosynthesize, where's it going to get its energy from? Nowhere. Those first two little leaves it has. That's what those are for. And incidentally, in most plants, you'll see those first two leaves kind of shrivel up and drop off. Eventually, that's what happens as the plant matures. So the first two leaves come out. It uses the energy that's stored in those two little leaves are actually in the seed. So they emerge. The plant uses up the energy for those, and then it continues to grow. But where's it going to get the rest of its energy? During that initial burst of growth, the plant will start to send out its first few roots, and they're going to encounter all of the microbes and fungi that are existing in the soil. And whenever it makes contact with these guys, it sends out sugars through those roots and goes, hey, I've got some sugar here, product of photosynthesis, or in the case of those first two leaves, product of this storage that I have here. I'm willing to part with a little bit of this sugar in exchange for what you guys can bring me. I need nutrients. I need other things that are in the soil in order for me to grow. I need nitrogen. I need phosphorus. I need potassium. I need other things. I need iron. I need zinc. I need boron. I need copper. I need magnesium. I need manganese. I need that stuff over there. I don't even know what that stuff is, but I need it. Can you guys get that and bring it over here to me? Because my roots, I'm a tiny little plant. I just emerged from a seed. I can't reach all the way over there to where that manganese is and bring it back here and incorporate that into my structure to make my leaves do the thing that they're supposed to do. I can't do that. So it sends out that sugar in exchange. Bacteria will take care of breaking the chemical bonds that are in the minerals that are in the soil, take those necessary components in a form that the plant can actually use and exchange them at the root for that sugar. Fungi do a very, very similar thing, whether they encapsulate the root tip or whether they infiltrate the root tip. Fungi are also involved in the process of exchanging nutrients for sugar. In the case of fungi, it also means water and a few other things too. So this is what's happening with a normal, healthy plant, with normal, healthy soil. The microbes that are in the soil are busily working and bringing nutrients from the soil to the plant. The plant is engaged in exchange. But we sprayed the soil with glyphosate. Remember, this is Roundup. Okay, I'm not going to say Roundup anymore because it's not just Roundup. It's all of the herbicides that contain glyphosate. Roundup is just a brand name. We sprayed with glyphosate. We killed off our weeds. Now, the glyphosate remains in the soil. It takes 140 days total for glyphosate to reach 1/2 of its lethal capacity to kill plants. 1/2 of its lethal capacity in 140 days. So that's about 4.5 months, and coming up to 5 months, between 4 and 5 months. Twice that's 1/4 of its lethal potential, is 9 months. And usually 9 months is about enough that if you're going to go after using glyphosate, you can get away with planting, and your plants will probably survive. Most of them will. You might lose a couple, but most of them will probably survive. But the other thing that happened is the worst part, which is what's going on in the soil. The glyphosate hit the soil. It infiltrated into the soil. It came into contact with the microbiome in the soil. And remember, it's antimicrobial. It kills bacteria. That's what it was intended for initially, before it turned out to be a really good plant killer as well. But now it's attacking the mitochondria in the cells of the bacteria, trying to replicate and grow and produce more bacteria in the soil, and preventing them from being able to successfully grow and replicate. So it kills off a life cycle of the bacteria in the soil. Because the bacteria in the soil have been killed off by the antimicrobial that the soil has now been sprayed with, a normal, healthy plant growth cannot occur. In other words, the plants can't send out sugars to the microbes in the soil in exchange for nutrients the way they ordinarily would, because the microbes are no longer existing in the soil. We've killed them off. Now, the only way these plants are going to be able to get their nitrogen, the only way they're going to get their phosphorus, the only way they're going to be able to get their potassium is if the farmer comes along and sprays those chemicals on the field on a regular basis to feed the plants. Because the plants are only going to be able to uptake those nutrients when they're in a soluble form and immediately next to the roots of the plants, which don't go very far. So that's the problem that we encountered using glyphosate herbicide in the farming operation. It really does make the person that's using it addicted to chemical farming, because the healthy biome can't handle growing plants the normal way anymore. All right. So we covered how normal and healthy plants get grown. We covered what it is that glyphosate did that stopped that. And now we'll talk about the other herbicide that's become popular to talk about, which is the aminopyrrolid herbicide. I'll mention the brand name that most people have heard of, and we'll mention that once. And from here on out, we'll just call it aminopyrrolid, because once again, there are several different brands that use aminopyrrolid. This is just the one they were based familiar with, right? And that's called Grazon. Grazon. Everybody knows about Grazon. They've heard about Grazon. Grazon uses an aminopyrrolid as a broadleaf, broad spectrum herbicide. Broad spectrum and broadleaf herbicide. So, what does aminopyrrolid do, and how is that different from glyphosate? So, glyphosate, whenever it goes on a plant, it can go on a mature plant, and it immediately starts working on wilting that plant down and killing it off. It'll wilt down and dry up. Aminopyrrolid, whenever it enters into a plant, does nothing at all to existing tissue. Tissue that's already been developed is perfectly fine and healthy. It doesn't kill it. What it does instead is affects the ability of the plant to build new tissue. So if you had aminopyrrolid in your soil or in your mulch or right there already as your plants were emerging, your first two leaves that come out would be normal because those are part of the seed. They came with the seed. They're going to be normal. But as the plant starts to use up the energy from those two leaves, it sucked it up. Okay, now I got the energy. I can go sugars out here to the microbiome. We're going to exchange that for nutrients. We're going to grow up, and we're going to make a whole bunch of new growth up here. We're going to photosynthesize, and we're going to be awesome. Except aminopyrrolid affects the way that the cells are built. And now the cell walls wind up being built distorted, not normal. The leaves will become curled, maybe bubbly looking, and abnormally shaped. Whenever glyphosate goes onto a plant, it'll make the leaves shrivel up, but it doesn't make the leaves grow in an abnormal way. So this is what the difference between aminopyrrolid and glyphosate. Aminopyrrolid affects the plant's ability to grow in the future, and then glyphosate kills the plant, period. So glyphosate kills the plant, 140 days later, it will kill about half the plant, another 140 days, another half, and then another 140 days. So by the time the full year is over, it's maybe about an eighth of its original lethal effectiveness. But there's still a little bit of that left in the soil too. So it's cumulative year after year, you may notice. And that's kind of scary in and of itself. Meanwhile, aminopyrrolid works at destroying a plant's ability to build new structure. So I hope that makes sense. Whenever you look at those pictures, if you're looking at pictures like this one here, Rizuki Farms, that is the effects of glyphosate. That's not the effects of aminopyrrolid. And that's one of those good news, bad news situations. The good news is by next year, for the most part, that chemical residue is going to be out of their soil and they will be back in business. But the bad news is from here on until the end of the year, they're not going to be able to produce much produce from these areas, and they're still having to pay the people back for what they pre-ordered from the CSA program. So unless they get help, they're going to go out of business. And that could be me, that could be you, that could be any one of us that pursue the dream of independence, having our own business, working with the land, doing this sort of thing. It's just devastating, and I hope if you can't go and donate, you can at least make sure you put a bug in the ear of the other channels out there that are involved in this sort of space. If a channel like ours can donate 1 month's worth of ad revenue, maybe, just maybe, some of these bigger channels might do it. And just to show you I put my money where my mouth is. There I am right there. That's us. So let's go ahead and stop that particular stream. Hang on a second here. Let's close that out. All right. Let me see here. Sassafras Red came in and joined us. We've got Milton Welch with us. I'm glad you find it informative. I do try to make it just a little bit informative, hopefully a little bit entertaining too. Who knows? Uh, I'm no David the Good. Now there's a genius with a guitar, huh? All right, here we go. And David's actually the guy that first told me about aminopyrrolate. And I had not encountered aminopyrrolate in the garden before. And like everybody else, I had grown up with the idea that you grab manure, throw it in your garden, it's going to be good. And I was like, well, hang on a second here. The only reason I was not experimenting with, or not experimenting, the only reason I was not growing with manure already was because I don't really have a ready supply of it. And I was looking at ways I can get organic material and fertility on the cheap, and having to pay for truckloads of manure was not something I was interested in doing. So I was fortunate to have not been hit with aminopyrrolate myself. All right. So Vicky's saying, so what makes the aminopyrrolates worse than glyphosate is that they last for several years rather than months, and that is certainly true. They're both horrible, and for entirely different reasons. The aminopyrrolate, yes, it's a persistent broadleaf herbicide, so the molecule stays in the soil, it stays in the manure, it stays in wherever, and does not easily break down, and it keeps on doing this thing to emerging broadleaf plants where when they're trying to build new structure, it makes it come out warped and twisted, and eventually it kills the plant off. It can't survive that way. It won't be able to photosynthesize properly, produce good fruit. And it does last for many years. And it's not easy to get rid of once you've got it. You can grow grasses, cut the grass, and then treat the grass like a biohazard and dispose of it. Don't compost it down and put it back into your field because you're just introducing that molecule. Fungal remediation might help get rid of it in the long term. I think probably stacking up, maybe just grow wheat, just grow wheat over everywhere that's been infested with glyphosate. Cut it back short whenever it gets close to maturity. Don't use, or not glyphosate, aminopyrrolate. When soil that's been contaminated with aminopyrrolate, grow wheat in it because it's a monocot. It can survive. It'll pull that molecule up, hold it in its tissue. Go ahead, cut it close, then treat all of that wheat straw just like it was a biohazard. And possibly you could use oyster mushrooms on the wheat straw to break it down, and the resulting product that's left afterwards may actually be safe for use. So once the mycelium from the oyster mushrooms break down, having consumed the wheat straw that has the aminopyrrolate in it, I would be willing to try doing a test growth in that to see if it's actually successfully gotten rid of it. Hopefully it works, and that's the way we can get rid of it long term. Otherwise, we're stuck with a molecule working its way through our ecosystems that just takes way too long to get rid of. So that's the thing that makes aminopyrrolate bad. Glyphosate is bad simply because it kills off the soil biome. The good news whenever that happens is we have means and ways of restoring the soil biome now that are a lot more readily available than was available to farmers in the past, even if they knew that they needed to be doing that, because it wasn't common knowledge that we needed to have a healthy microbiome in the soil. I mean, obviously, if it was common knowledge, people would not be spraying glyphosate now. So apparently it's not common knowledge, or people assume that the reward is worth the risk. But I'm not entirely certain they understand what the risk is. All right. Sassafras is saying, bad smoke in central Illinois. Couldn't see the next bridge a mile away. I was here in Missouri. They had a funky smell and a haze in the air. So maybe that's what it is, huh? They're getting some of that. Mary is saying, smoke in Wisconsin and Iowa. So we've got smoke and haze across a large portion of the country to the north of us here in Green Country. Apparently, passing to the north of us, lots of smoke and haze. So I don't know where the source is. So if anybody happens to know where it's coming from, that would be That would be good to know. I don't know where is it coming from. And Doug and Stacy, I think it was earlier today, was talking about haze and bad smelling stuff in the air. So that's Missouri. I think they're closer to. I think they're closer to Jefferson City, not our end of Missouri. Anywho, watch out for the smoke out there. Talking once again about the Ruzicki farm, I do too. Of course, there's all sorts of possibilities there. Anywhere from, it may have been an accident, uh, accident and self-inflicted. That can happen. Um, if you're doing large scale operations, farming, and you're using chemical blade, getting things mixed up could happen. A farmhand could go this sprayer instead of that sprayer. 2 acres worth off of one sprayer, that would be an awful lot of residue left over in the sprayer. So that won't be one doozy of an accident. Um, but yeah, it could happen. Or another possibility is it's about the right time of year for farmers that grow wheat to be using a crop duster, for example, to spray that glyphosate on their crops to dry them. Not that that's a good practice, but it is a practice. And an accidental overspray could occur that way. 2 acres is one heck of an accidental overspray. And then we're down to malicious intent, somebody going in there and doing it. But they're doing an investigation, and if it was malicious, hopefully they find out who did it, and people don't get away with that. But you never know. You never there are people that will go out there and wreck your business because they've got it in their head that you're a bad person for having a business, which is crazy. Um, so more reports of smoke in Illinois, central Illinois. Where is it coming from? So we got Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri. So what's going on out there? Where's the smoke coming from? Does anybody know? Katie says Canadian smoke, and Milton, I'll get to you in a second. Canadian smoke is intense in southern Illinois, although based on photos, maybe half as much. So it's from Canada. Is that the Canadian wildfire still going on, and that's what that smoke is? Whew, that's bad. And I heard about another train derailment. This one up on what was it? Not the Missouri River, or was it the Missouri River? No, it was further to the west. I can't recall off the top of my head. But another one of those train wrecks derailed, chemicals in the waterway going down, and apparently it is coming down through the Missouri River. So they've got Missouri River coming in from the west, coming down this way with chemical spills. Yeah, and then the Ohio River up here. Remember the last big train derailment, that big fiasco? That one had water coming down. They're both going to meet here in between Illinois and Missouri and make their way down past Missouri, and everywhere from there south in the Mississippi watershed is going to have whatever chemicals got spilled in it. So yay. It's sad. It's just sad. Let's see. Jasper has to say about northern Illinois. Do you mean above the 80? I can't imagine how much worse it could be north of here. I mean, yeah, if that's the Canadian smoke, oh boy. Wow. Well, here's an interesting thing here. Okay, before I get to that, Milton asked an important question. He says, where does the aminopyrrolid come from? And the aminopyrrolid comes from people that are growing grass primarily and hay, and it's being used in pastures. It's being used mainly in cattle operations. And it's used in cattle operations because they like to stack more cattle in less space than they really should, because the idea is we're farming for profit, we're ranching for profit. We need a lot of animals, and Jason forgot to move his phone away from. This is the kind of phone I use. It's a dinosaur. It's a relic. You actually have to pay extra to get these, but they They were made in the days before children started uh, being used for slave labor to get rare earth minerals out from underneath the Congo rainforest. Well, after they clear cut the Congo rainforest and strip mined it, you know, that's why I own one. Anyway, sorry, I'm done preaching at you. What was we talking about? Oh yes, where does the minapurelid come from? So, ranchers, people who raise beef, and then sometimes dairy farmers too, are pasturing their cattle. Now, the ideal amount of pastures that you need is somewhere between 4 and 6 acres per cow, depending upon the quality of your grass. That includes enough space to cut hay too. So if you're thinking about going into the business of having cattle, you need a certain amount of space. And if you've got decent grass, 4 acres per cow. If you don't have decent grass, closer to 6. So it depends upon where you're at. Not all grass is equivalent to other grass. Um, they like to have a lot of cows on a small amount of space. They buy in feed from elsewhere because at a certain point, your conversion ratio is better to buy in the feed and feed the cattle, fatten them up, and sell them. You're selling live weight at the auction. Also, this is why the cattle, after they get bought from the original farmer, go into a feedlot where they're force fed a whole bunch of junk to put extra pounds on them. Doesn't happen everywhere. Of course, if you're raising them yourself, your cow is going to be mostly grass fed and you're going to have better quality beef. But I digress. Because they have too many cows on too small a space, the ground goes, hey, I'm getting compacted. A lot of my nutrients are being soaked up and used up by producing all this grass that's being grazed on and then pounded down by these constant cattle hooves. I need to do something to repair the damage. And what it does is it allows certain plants to sprout. Chiefly, the ones that the ranchers are not interested in growing are red-rooted pigweed and Canadian thistle. Those are the two big ones, right? And they'll treat them with pre-emergence and some other things, some other herbicide treatments that may not necessarily be as bad as aminopyralid. But aminopyralid has the promise to be able to take all of your red-rooted pigweed and all of your Canadian thistle, and as a matter of fact, everything that is not grass, and destroy it. And so they spray this on there because it's going to destroy everything that isn't the grass. They just want the grass for the cattle. And of course, the promise is year after year, you treat with it once, and by next year, it's still working. And like every other year, you can treat with this, and you can keep anything that isn't grass from growing in your pasture. Isn't that just wonderful? If you're raising cattle and there's no downstream side effects. But the downstream side effect is the cows eat the grass. The cows make manure. The manure from the cows still has the aminopyralid molecule in it, and it still kills broadleaf weeds. It kills any broadleaf plant, including vegetables. And so that's the problem. It entered into the food chain whenever people wanted to keep their pastures free from things that weren't grass. So cattle pastures, hay fields, things of that nature. And that's where it came from. And it does such a good job of keeping the broadleaf weeds from popping up in your pasture or your hay field that it's kind of hard to persuade the person that's growing that pasture with hay or in grass to stop doing it. It's working fine for them. And as long as they're not having to deal with the after effects of this molecule in their food supply, why do they care? They're not growing vegetables. They're growing beef. Yeah. So there you go. That's where it came from. Ken Jennings in the house. This is interesting. So this is what I want to jump down to. Carolyn was saying, David was saying biochar might pull out the grazon type herbicides. Might, maybe, who knows? I don't know. But then they need to do put a lot of nutrition back into the soil. Yeah, if you have uncharged biochar, if you're just putting raw char in, because raw char wants to bond onto everything and absorb and a whole bunch of stuff, yeah, it might. But then that molecule is still inside there in the biochar, waiting to be denatured, waiting to be broken down into something else. So it might lock it up, but that may not be enough. I don't know. I don't know. Worth experimenting with, though. Let's see. So here's Katie saying her son in Chicago. That's that's up there on the lake in Illinois. I've been there before. Even by Lake Shore, showed me photos of smoky roads, etc. The smell of wood and plastic burning is detected. So it's, oh yeah, it's more than trees getting burnt. All right, aminopyrrolid. What's that? We just covered aminopyrrolid being the molecule that is in broadleaf herbicide, marketed under a whole bunch of different names, but that is not what happened to the Riziki farms. What happened to the Riziki farms looks like glyphosate. All right. Okay, Laurie's World reporting from Canada says they're burning up the eastern side of Canada. Fires everywhere. Everywhere up there in Canada. And Marian's asking, not sure how aminopyrrolids are made. I'm not sure either. It's our beautiful chemical industry. Most likely it came from petroleum somehow. I would imagine that's where most things do. Kind of reminds me of a conversation I had with Mary earlier today about turning oil into worms, or turning oil into worm castings. Like, here's the thought concept. Maybe we could do something like this. We had the space for it. Oy. Katie is saying, eyes, nose stinging since Monday, upper respiratory aggravation. Been working outside all week. And of course, probably not a whole lot of luck even going inside to avoid that. It's just pervasive and everywhere. Wow. It's terrifying. Yeah, and you can have Grazon in a wheat field as well to get rid of the weeds. Of course, it's absolutely and totally unnecessary to use a broadleaf herbicide in a wheat field, because I have discovered that all you need to do to grow wheat. Oh, and I don't happen to. You guys wouldn't mind if I left you. I'm going to get right back to this. You wouldn't mind if I left you for just a second, grab something from over here. I'll tell you what I'll do. And here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. Let's do this. I'm going to give you a little video clip here. It's a trailer for a film that I helped to finance. That's going to be coming out for streaming about mid-July, so not long from now, and you'll be able to see what it looks like and enjoy this. And while that trailer is running, I'm going to run and just give me a second here. Let's pause that. While that trailer is running, I'm going to run and grab something to show you real quick. So this is a trailer for a film that I helped to finance, and we're going to get right back to this in just a moment. I hope you enjoy the trailer. Here, watch this. This is for my friend Andrew Tregula at Drew Media, and this is the trailer for Jones Plantation.
You can control a man for a period with brute violence, but you cannot truly own a man unless he thinks your word is law and that he must obey, and is virtuous for doing so.
We are losing money. A little more every month that goes by with no end in sight. They can sense weakness, and they are gonna smell blood like a gator to chum. They're gonna kill us both.
Mr. Scott said this man is a miracle worker. I think he can help us. You're a nit.
Good people, good people. My
That's
name is
gonna trigger some people.
As of this very moment, you are now all free. Free at last.
From now on, we are all in this together.
This plantation will run on equality. I have created something called Jones Plantation Credits.
We're gonna keep them up to their ears in debt.
Jimmy Jack will now be in charge of our new security team to protect this plantation and to serve all of you. You two are gonna have a little contest to see who can win the hearts and minds of the human livestock out there.
Jones!
Most people are weak-minded. To wield real power, you must be willing to do what most consider unthinkable.
What most people consider to be unthinkable is that men like you even exist.
That's our greatest advantage. As free people, we work together for mutual benefits, pledging our love and loyalty to the plantation.
We are not free.
I ain't no slave.
They have tricked you into thinking that choosing your own master is the same as being free.
You offer them a truth that they don't want. They want to feel safe.
There's a dark thing going on this plantation.
Every man deserves freedom, but freedom isn't free.
I'm Nathaniel Jones, and I approve this message. God bless you, and God bless this glorious... Toodaloo.
Okay, so that's what we've got coming out mid-July streaming. So we'll be able to watch that pretty soon. I told Andrew that I was kind of impressed with the trailer, because really you can get, if the only thing you ever saw was the trailer, you can get the entire message from that first line, from that very first line. Once you've got a person convinced that obedience to whatever this thing is, this authority, is a virtue, you own them. All right, so back to the issue of Grazon and glyphosate on wheat. So Grazon, or aminopyrrolid, stops the broadleaf weeds, and you can grow wheat without weeds. But you don't need to do that at all, because you see this particular head of wheat that I've got right here. This was growing in the yard with the ducks, and it's actually fully developed. The head's dried, the seeds are intact, and it's a perfectly harvestable wheat. Now it didn't all uniformly dry, so you're at the whims of the weather when you can cut and harvest your wheat if you were to grow it this way. But as it turns out, ducks don't like to eat wheatgrass, so you can grow wheat and turn your ducks loose at a rate of about 24 ducks per acre, and let them forage. They'll eat the broadleaf weeds, they'll eat the grasshoppers, they'll eat all the pests, and your wheat will remain untouched until it's time for it to harvest. Then you move your ducks on to someplace else, like maybe your corn patch. And there you go. So you can actually grow wheat without chemicals, and it comes out perfect wheat. Isn't that great? Not a bit of disease on the plants, no pest pressure, just perfect. And run them with ducks. So once again, organic farming, you can use the animals in conjunction, harness the duckness of the duck. They don't want to eat the wheatgrass. You can grow perfect wheat just like that. And you don't need to use the chemicals, or nobody needs to use the chemicals anyway. So instead of a chemically tainted food product, you could have extra eggs as a byproduct, and then eggs wouldn't be so expensive anymore. Isn't that a wonder? All right, so let's see. Diane's saying, what? Smoking North Carolina too? Oh my goodness, it's just going everywhere. Just going everywhere. Milton saying, I get the problem. He described, no idea why. So it can come to you in a couple of different ways. It either comes to you in the manure. So if you're getting a bag manure from somewhere, it can wind up in the manure, even if it was an organic supply of feed going to the cattle. If they got hay that had been grown on a pasture that was using this, that wound up in the manure. And especially in feedlot operations, they're shoving whatever is cheapest into the mouths of those cattle. So if the manure came from a feedlot, didn't matter if the cattle were raised organically or not. Once they hit the feedlot, all that went out the window. Let's see. It shows up in hay, and it can also show up in straw. It's more likely to show up in hay than in straw, because hay was specifically grown with the idea of being raised as cattle fodder. Straw is the byproduct of making wheat, and not everybody uses a broadleaf herbicide on their wheat field. Not everybody does. A lot of people who grow wheat commercially do use the glyphosate now, though, because that dries it in quickly. It makes harvesting a lot simpler for them. So it's a matter of convenience that they use glyphosate to dry the crop, and also really kind of a matter of convenience that they may use aminopyrrolid to stop broadleaf weeds. But straw can sometimes have aminopyrrolid in it as well. This is as a precaution. You're not necessarily safe with straw. Okay. Vicky's saying more than a few of the Canadian wildfires are deliberately set. Who knows? There are people that want to see the world burn. You know, they're out there. Let's see. Well, yeah, mostly, but people may choose to use. They may choose to use aminopyrrolid on their wheat. They may. Not that they will, but they may. Usually wheat grows so well that it crowds out your other competing weeds. Yeah, wheatgrass is a weed as far as I'm concerned. It's grass, right? I don't really want a whole lot of grass. But I'm getting to the point now where I'm rethinking my entire posture on weeds. There are plants that are going to grow in every niche, right? We're not going to be able to stop that from happening. The question is, are they plants that we can live with? Are they plants that we can deal with? And if I've got to manage a ground cover, either weeding it or pulling it or cutting it or something, if I have to manage a ground cover, I would rather have clover that whenever I cut it, it makes fertilizer for me than grass that whenever I cut it, it just grows back. And I mean, it's good for biomass, but I want more than just biomass. I want it all, right? I want nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, biomass, all of it. I want it all. So I'm being more selective about what weeds I have. And that's just, I plant seeds so that the weeds I get are ones I choose. Okay. So yeah, it's usually hay and not wheat, but I would not rule out aminopyrrolid showing up in wheat. So it either came in the manure or it came in the hay or very possibly in the wheat, but not necessarily. So what do you use that's safe, right? That's the problem. What do you use that's safe? Leaf mulch works pretty well. If you can bag your leaves and save those, you can use those as mulch. A lot of municipal areas will allow you to get the ground up tree limbs and stuff like that from their operations. You can get chip drop, www.getchipdrop.com. So to have the people that do tree trimming drop off wood chips for you. Wood chips make a perfectly acceptable mulch that you can use that will not contain aminopyrrolid. Takes a little bit longer to break down than hay and straw, but on the other side, the components that are in wood mulch, once they decompose, add lots of macronutrients to your soil. So you get things that your soil might be wanting to have anyway. Yeah. Yep. That sounds like an aminopyrrolid problem in your soil that most likely got in there from an organic input that we would have thought was perfectly safe and beneficial and good to put in your soil, because for the past few thousand years, that's what we've been doing in gardening, is taking manure and adding it to the garden. It enriches the soil, and everybody knows that, right? And now it's not necessarily safe. That's the problem. That is the problem. All right. And people are still going out there and getting manure and putting it in their gardens, and quite often are having no problems whatsoever. It's just here and there. Occasionally you get a batch that's got too much aminopyrrolid in it, or some aminopyrrolid in it. I don't know how much is too much. There might be a small amount, maybe a little damage here and there. Your plants will recover. Everything's fine. It's not ideal, but they'll live. So there might be like a level you can live with. Kind of like there's a level of pest pressure you can live with before you start looking for, okay, how do I kill every one of these little boogers, right? Mary is saying sprayers or fields are supposed to be schooled and licensed. It doesn't mean that they can't have accidents. It's amazing to me that the crop dusters hit the right field in the first place to begin with. It looks a lot different from the air than it does from the ground. So I guess you have to be kind of an experienced crop duster, maybe have somebody out there to mark the field that you're supposed to be hitting so you know where you're going. Of course, that's the difference between a professional operation and maybe the fly-by-night operation. Um, but accidents do happen. Let me see here. And yeah, good way to get immunopyramid is bags of manure from the store. Even if it says organic, it does not necessarily mean that it's immunopyramid free. Simply because you can't always check everything. So you're going to buy a hay in for the cattle, and the person you're buying the hay from says, "Oh yeah, it's organic hay. We didn't spray anything." And you can say, "Did you spray? Did you spray anything on the field?" "Oh yeah, we didn't spray anything." And then in their minds, we didn't spray anything this year. 2 years ago, we sprayed that broadleaf herbicide, but that was 2 years ago. It should be fine. Well, it's persistent broadleaf herbicide. It's still there, and there's a possibility that that hay could now be contaminated. But you say, yeah, since when do cattle eat only grass, right? Like there's not forbs out there, the nice broadleaf plants that are not grasses that cattle can eat that are good for them. There's a lot of things that cattle can eat other than grass, and probably should eat for the health of the cattle. But once again, we're mass producing cattle. Too many cattle, too low space, buying in the feed, trying to get as much money out of it as possible. And since we're massing the cattle together, we have to do things to help prevent illnesses in the cattle as well. So that means antibiotics and so on and so forth. And once again, those forbs, the non-leaf plants that are safe for cattle to eat, or maybe that cattle would eat in moderation, in nature, those would serve as the medicine that the cattle would need to keep themselves healthy. But you remove those because you got rid of them with the spray. Now you really do have to provide assistance to the cows for their immune support because you removed it. The natural immune support that they would be able to get from the herbs that they would eat whenever they weren't feeling well aren't there for them. So, boy, isn't it though? And when you hear the idea of there is a special herbicide that you can spray that targets only specific plants, doesn't that sound wonderful? It sounds great. Wow, I can spray this, and it's only going to destroy my weeds. My valuable crops, the stuff I want to grow, it's not going to destroy it. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Sounds good to me. Well, it actually works out pretty well if you use an animal with finicky eating habits to control your weeds. And then you just pick your crop around the finicky eating habits of the animal you're using to control your weeds. So I could put ducks loose in a field full of wheat, and the ducks don't want to eat the wheatgrass. Now, they might possibly want to eat the mature or maturing seed heads. So about the time that you're wanting your crop to start drying in would be about the time you're moving the ducks out to someplace else. You move the ducks someplace else, you harvest your wheat, and then you can rotate that around, use the crop or use that land for a different crop later on. There we go. Isn't that something? 100% organic wheat, no chemicals. All right. And Mary's talking about morning glories. I'll tell you what, if I could have a magic thing that would get rid of just like one particular weed, wouldn't that be great? Just this one. I just want to get rid of that weed. Just that weed. And morning glories is in the category of things that if I could get rid of them, I'd get rid of them. It's pleasant bindweed. Those are those little weeds the little vines that we've got growing everywhere, Mary. I mean, those little tiny ones with a little bit darker sort of oval shaped leaves. The leaves are kind of like oval, and then whenever they bloom, they produce that little tiny circular flower that opens up, looks an awful lot like a sweet potato flower. It's related, but it doesn't produce a tasty edible tuber. It's just an annoying weed that likes to strangle things. Yep. Well, I think there was some. I don't think it was a really bad amount of it, but there was some indication the way that some of the tomatoes turned out that there was something wrong, and it wasn't too incredibly bad. But whenever I heard about it, I was like, Oh, okay, now that makes sense. And I had made two little beds. I was planning on growing strawberries in. The two little raised beds. They were cement raised beds. They were like 3 blocks high, big ones. And I filled them up with everything from the store. Didn't use any native soil or anything, and it had issues. And that was part of it. Incidentally, I greatly improved the fertility of those raised beds right off the bat by introducing worms to them. So I put worms in them, and the introduction of worms, of course, they work to aerate, turn the soil, do all that other good stuff, but they also spread those effective microorganisms, the bacteria that are inside their gut biome. They spread that to the soil, and so as a result of them putting those microbes into the soil, it helps plants uptake um, nutrients in a healthy way. So whether or not the worms got rid of the aminopyrrolid problem, or whether or not introducing a healthy bacteria biome to the soil in the raised bed was what did it. Between that and just a season or two of growth, it straightened out, and now that particular soil has been spread everywhere, and I'm not worried about it. Anyway, horse manure. That's unfortunate. So probably what happened was the person that was keeping the horses was buying hay, not necessarily all alfalfa, but they're also getting regular meadow hay as well, and supplement feeding with meadow hay, and the meadow hay being from a pasture that's sprayed with aminopyrrolid. That's where it got there. That's where you got it. Otherwise, horse manure is awesome, and it's great stuff to feed to your garden. Yep. Let me see here. Oh, okay. Now I know where we're at in the chat. We're at the spot where I was showing the movie. All right. So, real quick before we go anywhere else, I'm going to give you another little screen share. Let's remove this thing. This particular screen share is just a news article right here from the AP. So we're going to share this AP story. Where is it? No. So we're going to pull it from The Economist. There you go. So here we go. What does it say at The Economist? It says a huge Norwegian phosphate boom. What's this? I'll go a little picture here. Here we go. Let me see. There it is. A huge Norwegian phosphate rock find is a boon for Europe. This is from The Economist. I've talked about this before, about how peak phosphorus is an event coming up. You may hear about it. You may hear it's not a big problem. You may hear it's a big problem. It's about 40 years out altogether before we get to the point where the minable phosphorus has been consumed to the point where chemical farmers are going to have a hard time finding inputs to continue to grow the way they're growing. Of course, we have news like this, that in Norway, they found deposits of numerous minerals while they were running around looking for minerals, and they found, 70 billion tons combined deposits of, titanium, vanadium, and phosphate rock. And it says that could supply current global demand for more than 50 years. That's a lot of phosphate. So it seems like, based upon this article, and of course you'd want to log in to The Economist and check out their wonderful stories for the full story about what they found specifically in Norway in the way of phosphate rock. But there we have what looks like a reprieve for chemical farming. And maybe it is to a certain extent. We might look at it as a way that we could spend just a little bit more time making the necessary switches to our agricultural models, the way we go about growing and producing food, so that we don't hit that crunch where we have X number of people, billions of people to feed, and the inability to do so because we don't have enough inputs to continue with chemical farming. So this is just maybe instead of a reprieve for chemical farming, maybe we think of it as a reprieve for all of us, so we have the opportunity to make these changes now so that we can be prepared for a sustainable future. And a sustainable future which includes many, many more human beings, not many fewer human beings, the way the current WEF types envision the future. All right. U.S. tax plantation. That's it. Yes, sir. So I think a lot of people, when we're talking about the Jones Plantation film, a lot of people are going to see that. They're going to go, "Oh, my pearls! He said, did he say what I think he just said? I don't know if he said what we think he just said, but they're immediately going to start in on that. And I think if the left starts talking about it and about how terrible it is, the right's going to start talking about it, and that just might be enough to get the concept in front of a lot of eyeballs. A lot of eyeballs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people don't like being reminded of that uncomfortable fact, right? It's a truth that they don't like. They want to be safe. They want everything to be normal. Looking too closely at what's going on behind the curtain is not something people want to do, but it may be necessary for our this continued survival of civilization, that we really do examine that and go, wait a minute, why are we putting psychopaths in charge? Why do we have this habit? Oh, there we go. How will the multinational ag chemical companies make money to pay politicians? Good question. I don't know. It may be hard. Mary says, I already have copyright strikes. Gee, I wonder why. I don't know. Sometimes whenever you're recording, I'm playing music that's copyrighted. Oh, yeah. She says naughty words a lot too. Let me see. Trucker with a potty mouth. Yeah. Kim is saying, I made a mistake of following the trends a couple of years ago and did straw bale gardening. Ruined my garden soil for a couple of years and didn't even think about the chemicals never again. See, that's the thing. The Ruth Stout book that came out, it may have been a couple of decades ago that Ruth Stout put it out, in the straw bale gardening and everything else. Perfectly acceptable if it wasn't for aminopyrrolid. I mean, it's a perfectly acceptable method of gardening. There's nothing wrong with doing it, except for that little bit. But that's not the way it used to be. That was something that was never there whenever I was a kid growing up. It certainly was never something that was never there when Ruth was coming up. So it was a valid method of gardening, and now it's just something that it's still valid, but you have to be careful about the source. There you go. And Milton is asking if the problem, talking about aminopyrrolid problem, could also come from bag manure sold in big box stores. Yes, it can, unfortunately. We've heard it appearing in things like black cow, which is a fairly common bagged manure. Even aged, even composted manure, it can show up in there. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that the mushroom compost that comes from people that grow portobello and the creminis and the little tiny white restaurant button mushrooms. That's all the same mushroom, by the way. I believe that the mushroom compost that's left after they've grown the mushrooms has successfully removed the aminopyrrolid from mushroom compost. Of course, that means that whenever people eat restaurant mushrooms, they're probably consuming aminopyrrolid and it's going into their manure. So if you're in the habit of eating white button mushrooms, don't use your own manure in your garden. You might accidentally introduce aminopyrrolid to your garden from the button mushrooms. That would be an interesting study to conduct too. Like, let's see what happens if I eat nothing but these mushrooms, or a bunch of these mushrooms, and then we test my manure for aminopyrrolid. Is it there? That's kind of gross. Veteran Ironwood is here asking, what did I miss? Tonight we talked about the chemical addiction of chemical farming, of course, specifically glyphosate being used for weed control and for drying crops in, and what it does to the soil, and of course things that you need to do to correct that. Now, I didn't get into what we need to do to correct that. I just mainly spent most of this time, the first entire hour, talking about the problem. And the solution, of course, is if you've got soil that's been exposed to glyphosate, it does take some time for it to break down, but it will break down. But the soil's microbiome has been destroyed. It's been wrecked. Maybe not completely, but it's certainly been knocked back. And so nowadays we have companies that produce EM, effective microorganisms, things that like yeast, common yeast, lactobacillus, very, very common bacterium. Mixing up yeast and lactobacillus into sprayers and spraying that over our fields that have been touched by glyphosate puts those types of microbes back into the soil. And those general categories are mainly what is at work doing a lot of the decomposition work and transfer of nutrients to plants. So yeasts, stuff like that. Oh, I don't happen to have. Oh yeah, I do. I was gonna say stuff like mycorrhizal inoculant. There's some what is that? Wild Root Organics, mycorrhizal inoculant. You get this stuff. I mix this up with starch water. I'll take corn or whatever I've got that's starchy. I mean, I could boil spaghetti. Take the water that's got whatever starch is in it and inoculate that with that and let it grow. And that lets me spread it out and make more of it. So instead of having, 1 tablespoon per gallon, I now made 40 gallons out of the same stuff by propagating it and growing it in a bucket. It smells a bit like fruit punch, which is fun. So you can take mycorrhizal inoculates, you can take lactobacilli and multiply those, grow those. The old method was spraying horticultural molasses on your field, whatever cheap sugar you had. And the idea was the sugar feeds the soil microbes, so you multiply the soil microbes. Now that you have more microbes, they help with your plant growth by exchanging nutrients with the plants. So adding sugar to your soil, literally sweetening your soil, was something that people would do to increase that microbe count. Not everybody knew why they were doing it. They just knew that if you spread molasses on your field, everything grew better. You put manure on your field, everything grows better. Molasses on your field, everything grows better. That was what people did, and it works. They kept on doing it. Now, the science behind it is you're feeding the microbes in the soil, and that's what's making it grow. So whenever you cover crop with daikon radish or sugar beet, like we're doing, you're putting sugars into the soil to feed the microbiome. And that does a whole lot more than just spreading a fertilizer, because having active functioning microbes in your soil really delivers the nutrients to your plants, if they're there at all. All right. Ron said, I use black cow manure, and many people do. And occasionally you do wind up with a bag that messes you up. Yep. It's sold in a yellow bag with black lettering, and there have been reports of people having aminopyrrolid problems with black cow. The question is, did it come from the black cow, or did it come from maybe the hay they were using as a mulch? Don't know. Just be cautious. The easiest way to find out if the batch that you've got is good or not is whenever you first get it, go ahead and cut the bag open, put a couple of beans in there, let the beans grow. Once those first 2 leaves, remember the first 2 leaves that come out of the seed, they're in the seed. Once those have been used up and it starts building new leaves, if they come out curled and wrinkled and nasty looking, you've got contaminated soil. Use it to grow something grass. Use it to grow grass. If it doesn't, then it's safe. You can use it in your garden. So just a general extra step of precaution: buy your bag soil ahead of time. Don't make it an afterthought, and test it first, just to make sure. Black cow is $1 higher this year. Well, I mean, it's $1 higher because of fertilizer shortage, and $1 higher because everything's more expensive now. Simmons came in and asked a question. This is Jason Simmons, I think, perhaps, maybe, yes, okay. Incidentally, thank you very much, and your order will be there by Thursday. Do you think landrace genetics could ever overcome the herbicides? Maybe genetic combos working with microbes to process the compounds to some degree. That would be interesting. Landrace genetics would probably definitely help, because some are going to be better at taking care of their own microbiome than others. For example, a plant that really kicks out those sugars would feed more microbes than others. It might be more a question of what microbes get multiplied that become resistant to the herbicides. That would be a better answer to the question, because whenever we poison microbes, they develop resistances. I mean, this doesn't matter whether we're using an antibiotic or something else. If an organism is exposed to a poison, generationally speaking, there are going to be members of that population that manage to avoid getting poisoned for whatever reason, or they survive it, they recover from it better, or they weren't affected by it as much. And those genes being predominant, because those are the ones that survived and reproduced, if the ability to resist a chemical in the first place was present in the genes, then the reductive process would remove the things that can't resist the chemical. The mutation process would add the possibility of the chemical resistance, but mutations aren't as common as all that. So occasionally you might get lucky. The way they did it with Roundup Ready crops was specific gene editing to make them Roundup Ready. But something may happen with our microbiome where the bacteria can develop a resistance to some of these antimicrobials to the point where they get around it and they do their jobs anyway. Could that be a good thing or a bad thing? If we're forcing a mutation or we're forcing a speciation of soil microbes, could that have a serious negative impact upon us downstream? What if we force the normal range of soil microbes out to the point where only that limited range that has the ability to resist herbicide winds up propagating themselves? Is that something that eventually is going to harm our food supply? And that's a lot of questions I can't answer. That's a lot of questions to think about. Generally speaking, if you get a good genetically diverse germplasm like the big horse corn that you guys just got, and you grow it specifically for where you're at, you selectively breed it, what you've got for characteristics that are good for your area, it's going to become more speciated. It won't have the full genes that you're gonna have from back here, but that's okay. If you wind up needing more of it, I can send you refresher seeds later on, and hopefully you won't need them. Hopefully you won't need them. You'll have a variety that grows really well in Tennessee, and that will be that. But I don't know. Talking about Danny bred his Danny corn has that same tendency to produce aerial roots and mucus and hopefully feed itself. That would be cool. Yeah, that's the thing, though, right? I think that there may be maybe not microbes, possibly it's fungi that we're looking at that's going to do the necessary chemical work, organic chemical work to break down those herbicides effectively. And he doesn't know any better than I do. I mean, we don't know. There's a lot of research to be done out there. Oh, Carolyn has a report on black cow. Hey, dairy operation a couple of miles away, part of the university program, and they give their manure to black cow, and they use herbicides on their fields. Yikes. Yep. Shoot, glyphosate in university programs. That reminds me. I'm a little bit over, but I thought about getting a clip to show you, but I decided not to. I didn't even know if I was going to talk about it or not. But there is several university programs going on with using perennial clover as a cover crop along with corn, which I thought was a great idea. But the way they recommended doing it whenever the university did this in their test field was they planted clover in the test field. They grew it. It was beautiful, great, wonderful white clover, beautiful stuff, great coverage, not a lot of adventitious weeds. I don't know how they got rid of the adventitious weeds. Probably they used herbicide. But then when it came time to plant the corn, they recommended towing a buggy behind your tractor with a sprayer that would spray glyphosate on the strip of clover where you're getting ready to seed the corn. So you top kill the clover with glyphosate and then plant the corn immediately thereafter. So, I mean, you start out with a good premise. We're going to use cover crop, protect the soil, build nitrogen, feed the corn naturally with nitrogen from the clover. And then they had to go with the chemical. And you could have used they could have used a flamer instead. Just have a flamer on that same rig, little propane tank and the flamer, spark it up, and you just flame one strip where you're gonna plant. And within a day or two after that flame passes over it, the plant will wilt down. You can plant the corn in there, and by the time the clover grows back into the base of the corn and fills in that ground cover slot again, the corn shot up, and it's not going to be choked out by the clover. So there was no point or no need at all to use a chemical on the soil at all. Now we'll just sell you a masterclass later, right? And yeah, if you're looking for ways to replace affected microorganisms, turning worms loose is a great way to do it, because all of the biology necessary to build healthy soil is found in the gut, in the microbiome of the earthworm. So their digestive system is great for our soil. It really doesn't matter what kind of earthworm it is. They're all good. So it's Experimental Farm Network, yeah. Once again, they've got a few interesting strains of corn whenever they have them. Like us, supplies are limited. Get them while you can. As of today, we have 19 packs. That's 19 100 seed packs of Big Horse spotted corn left. We have, I don't remember how many, maybe about a dozen or so birdhouse gourd seeds. They're not super special birdhouse gourds. They're just birdhouse gourds. They're ordinary bottle gourds. Those aren't particularly special. The only reason I'm selling it is because, hey, I have seeds for sale. Buy birdhouse gourds from me. You can buy them from Baker Creek. You can buy them from anybody. Mine are a little bit cheaper than everybody else's because I don't have overhead. So may as well, right? Anyway, let's see. So the one that Experimental Farm Network came up with that's a little bit resistant to getting pollen. That's crazy. A gene that keeps it from getting pollinated from a GMO. I don't know how that's going to work. They call it independence corn. I'd have to look into that more before I say anything more about it, because I don't know how they got that. All right. Yep. So, let me see here. Katie's so nice. Talking about Mary's channel. I didn't even notice the potty mouth. It's probably because Mary only curses when it's appropriate. And appropriate cursing is like, well, yeah. I'm going to use the word there. Yeah, I checked these guys. I checked Experimental Farm Network out whenever I heard that they had some crossbreeds with Olathon, and they have been sold out of most of the stuff. But some of those were really interesting looking corn too. Interesting. Penicillin, free for the masses. You should be able to make it. I need to do some research on coming up with penicillin. I don't know if it'd even be effective anymore. As many times as people prescribed antibiotics for conditions that they shouldn't be prescribing antibiotics for. Because the person comes in, doc, I'm sick. Doc, give me something. Can you give me a script or something? And they go, well, I'm going to give you some antibiotics. If it's a viral infection, the antibiotics isn't going to do anything for it. They might help with an adventitious bacterial infection if you have lots of mucus and phlegm and stuff in your lungs, and it's possible you could get an adventitious bacterial infection as a secondary infection whenever you're sick with the virus, but it doesn't do anything for the virus. Your immune system has to fight off the virus, period. End of story. That's the way it happens. Your immune system has to fight it. Either you have antibodies because you had an immunization, or you have antibodies because you had prior exposure. Whether your immunization was vaccination or inoculation, however you got immunization, you're, at the end of the day, your immune system has to fight off the virus. You can't just give somebody a pill and that cures it. Okay, there is an exception. I believe some of the byproducts that can be removed and harvested from human blood plasma, like interferon, can directly attack and affect viruses. But it's kind of expensive for the average person to go, "Hey doc, let me get some interferon. I am feeling a little down today." You know, that needs to be saved for more important things than the common cold. Anyway, there we go. Hey, there is Mark, the Arkansas woodcutter. Hi, Mark. How are you doing? The spiderworts that you brought over are doing great. I've been propagating them everywhere. We might even start selling them here before too long. Who knows? The Italian irises are getting eaten by grasshoppers on a regular basis, but they come back every year. I don't know why the grasshoppers love them, but they love them. And do you remember those leuthagords that you sent us, the seeds that you sent us a couple of years ago? I finally got around to planting them, and they're growing just fine along the back fence. So we've got some goodies that Mark sent us that are still being used in the garden today. Whoa, big news, big news. I did not know this. So getting ready to move to Alaska, you're going to wind up being one of Rudy's neighbors, huh? That would be something. I mean, have a collaboration with Alaska Prepper and Arkansas Woodcutter. What do you think? So he's going to become Alaskan Woodcutter. There we go. Let me see. Here we go. Mary's saying things that kill off all the microbes don't completely kill off the microbes. They become stronger and more resistant. Well, they have the potential to. It doesn't mean that they will. I mean, that saying that what doesn't kill you make you stronger, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, it's conditionally true. It can, but not necessarily. If the genes are there that will allow these microbes to resist some way, then the portion that couldn't resist dies off. And they don't pass on their genes. But the ones that are left pass on their genes. But that was a reduction in all the total genes in the gene pool, right? Speciation being the reductive process that it is. So we'd be losing some of the genetics and moving closer to possible loss of these bacteria that lost these genes, right? We don't want that to happen. That could be, if we don't have something to take their place, that could be incredibly bad. Fortunately, humans are good at finding plants and animals and even bacteria that can fill certain niches and moving them around whenever there's a deficiency. So we may be able to do that. Oh, you got the seeds today. Awesome. 90 days to maturity includes planting time. As long as you were past the first frost in the first place whenever you plant. Soil temperature being high enough to germinate. If the soil temperature is high enough to germinate, 90 days from the time you put the seed in to the time you can chop the plant down and harvest the corn, I would recommend going ahead and pulling the husks back whenever you harvest and hanging them to dry, because they're either going to try to germinate immediately while they're still on the cob and grow a new crop because they're crazy that way, or sometimes the moisture will create an opportunity for fungi to move in and turn your corn into corn smut, which is also edible, and if you're Mexican, a delicacy. For the rest of it, it looks like, what's happened to my corn? But the best way to prevent that, of course, is as soon as it hits maturity, go ahead and cut the stalk, dry your cobs, and even pulling the husk back to let some airflow get into them seems to help out. It does not affect the viability of the seed to not let it fully dry before pulling back the corn husks. And Vicky's saying, yeah, also, a lot of weeds are becoming resistant to glyphosate. if there was the genes that will allow them to resist the effects of the glyphosate in the first place, well, those weeds reproduced. So you get you'll get weeds that are resistant, diminishing returns, but you still wind up wrecking your soil biome. Belt loops here with light number 20. Woohoo! How the Garden's got a major lightning storm passing by. Those are fun, except whenever they come with high winds and hail. I like to watch them. Yeah, right. Talk about top killing your cover crop with a flamer instead of wet blading it. Flamer won't pay the big ag companies to pay the politician. Yeah, right. Well, I'm trying to work the other end of that, right? I'm trying to remove the power of the politician. And that's why I invest in movies like that's the reason I invest in movies like Jones Plantation. If you guys want to see the Jones Plantation trailer, it is on Drew Media, DREW Media. You'll find them on YouTube, and of course, streaming coming this mid-July. It's going to be awesome. Very, very powerful movie. Sassafras Red had some birdhouse gourd plants coming up from wow. Okay, so you had gourds that fell, rotted down, and they came back from seed just left on the ground. So that's a hardy plant. I like them. Did you? No, you didn't. You didn't get gourd seeds from us, did you? Did you? Somebody did. I don't remember who all got gourd seeds. Let's see. Vicky is talking about pizzas and cream, bicolor sweet corn. That was the last sweet corn that I tried growing. It turned out horribly. It did not want to grow for me at all. Talking about adventitious infections in lungs and upper respiratory system, bacterial infections that come along with the viral infection. But penicillin didn't do anything for viruses. So yeah, people got the idea that it did. It didn't. Let's see. Milton is asking about videos on FPJ. I made a small amount. What's the consistency on it? FPJ. What's FPJ? I probably know. I just don't recall off the top of my head. Let's see. Sounds like Korean natural farming stuff, right? Fermented plant juice. Yeah, it is Korean natural farming stuff. Fermented plant juice works great as a source of micronutrients, not usually as an overall fertilizer, but as a source of micronutrients as a foliar feed to improve the overall health of plants. Fermented plant juice is awesome. We do kind of a variation of that. Yeah, I figured it out. It's like it sounds like a Korean national farming term. I got it. We do a version of that that's very similar to what David does. It's like it works. You take your weeds, you put them in a barrel. I mean, if you're selective about what kind of weeds you are growing, where it's like about being intentional with your weeds. So I plant alfalfa intentionally. I plant clover intentionally. I plant a lot of things intentionally that I'm not really planning on growing for the harvest. What I'm planting them for is so that they will fill that niche. Instead of being a weed, it's something that does something positive for me. So whenever the clover grows and I cut it, I can throw it into that barrel and let it ferment down. Well, that clover had tons of nitrogen in it. The clover has very, very long roots that go deep down into the subsoil and draw minerals up from the subsoil. So it's mining for me. So I'm getting subsoil minerals. I'm getting nitrogen. I'm getting all sorts of good stuff from the clover whenever I cut it. I can either cut it, use it in compost. I can cut it, drop it down there in the pile next to the plant, and let it feed the plant right off the bat. I can cut it, put it in a heap with other things that I wet down and keep sheltered so the worms come in and it feeds the worms. I can cut it. I can put it into a barrel for liquid compost. And that's fermented plant juice is the barrel with liquid compost. All the weeds I can get, I put in there. I'll put dead animals. I'll put whenever I make bone broth, I like to make chicken and dumplings or chicken noodle soup. It's absolutely delicious. But whenever I make it, whenever I cook the whole bird or whatever I've got to cook, I'll cook it until the meat falls off the bones. I'll take the bones out, set them to the side, and then take the meat and the broth. Take the meat, set it over here, and let it chill out, usually in the refrigerator, so it doesn't get attacked by things. And then I'll take all those bones and roast them, crack them open, put them back in there with the broth and my cut ends of all the vegetables and everything, and cook the snot out of that until all the good stuff is out of the bones and the cut ends of the vegetables and everything else, all of that stuff. So I have vegetable and bone broth, chicken, vegetable, and bone broth. And then I'll take that and I'll take out all the bone bits and the bits of vegetables are left. So I've got splintered chunks of bone that I don't really want to let the dog eat. So I put those into the barrel too. And over the course of about a year or two, all the bone that went into those barrels where they're composting anaerobically, the anaerobes destroy the bones. They convert that into organic phosphorus. It becomes sludge, organic sludge at the bottom of the barrel. I filter off the liquid parts. The liquid parts now, after you solarize it to kill the anaerobes, are good to use as a foliar feed, just like FPJ, fermented plant juice. It's just a little bit longer process whenever I do it. I spend 2 years breaking stuff down before I use it. I'm down to like one barrel right now. I need to swap those out. I was using Rubbermaid trash cans, and they just don't last as long as I would like. So we're gonna slowly phase those out for 55-gallon drums, or who knows? I might even see if I can get IBC totes to do that in. But it doesn't take much. A couple of barrels is all you need. So maybe 3 or 4 barrels, one per year. Get to 2 years, empty out your first barrel. So every year, make 1 barrel, empty it out on a rotation of 2 to 3 years. And whenever you do that, the smell goes away. Whenever you're first doing it, for the first couple of weeks with fermented plant juice, it smells horrible. Oh my God, does it smell bad? The first couple of months, like you wait anywhere from like 2 or 3 weeks to 2 or 3 months, and your FPJ is good to go. It's rocking. I mean, everything's in it, but it's stinky as all get out. Wait 2 years, and the smell goes away, and the bones dissolve, and you've got the perfect cocktail. But it's not really high in nitrogen. It's high in all the other nutrients that your plant wants. So it's good. It's beneficial. Don't skip out on it. But it's not the one shot cure for everything. But once again, be selective with your weeds, and you can give it a higher nitrogen content. So plant alfalfa, plant clover, put that into the mix, and you'll get nitrogen in. Anyway, guys, we have come to the end of like almost an hour and a half here. I hope it's been a good show. Once again, Jason Simmons, thank you very much for ordering the Big Horse Spotted Corn. For the rest of you who haven't jumped in, and like Sassafras Red says, you may want to get some. We have 19 packs left for right now. Our crop is coming up fine. You may have been following on and saw that we had some storm damage, knocked a lot of the plants over. Don't worry, most of them stood back up on their own. A few of them had to have help to stand back up, but they're doing fine. We're going to change out the way we grow them for our second planting, where we grow them in a ring. This will be fun. Stick a stake in the middle, get a loop, get a piece of string about 3 foot long with a loop in it, and then draw a circle around that stake. So we have a 3 foot circle, and then around the edge of that, at 1 foot intervals, we plant our corn, and then around the corn, we plant our. We're going to be planting a vining black bean. So the Cherokee Trail of Tears black bean. That's the Cherokee horse bean. So that's my side of the family. Until I can get confirmation from the Osage Nation about what kind of bean would be grown here traditionally, I'm going to try to get whatever bean they were growing, if they were growing one, and see if I can grow that one in conjunction with the same corn that they were growing, so that it'll be the entire package. But we might do with what I got. And Carolyn just gave me $10. Thank you very much, Carolyn. I greatly appreciate it. It does help out quite a bit. See, David gave us $20 last month, and that went to the donate. I wound up donating it. I wound up donating it, but every little bit helps right now. Actually, it does. Views are down. Everybody's views are down, but $10 is probably going to help us actually get a paycheck. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. So anyway, we were talking about FPJ for pin and plant juice. Everything that you can do to increase your fertility, do it. Everything. And like I said, we're going to go ahead and head out. Don't forget to visit our website, www.greencountryagroforestry.com. We do now have, of course, gift cards available. So if you know that you're going to want to buy something in the future, but you're going to want to wait and get it later, or you want to get a present of a tree for somebody and you'd like to buy it from us instead of somewhere else, we're going to have a nice crop coming up this fall as they enter dormancy of black locusts. We're going to have a nice crop of red buds. We're going to have a couple of hazelnut trees, maybe. I don't know. Possibly. I don't know if we're going to sell them or not. We'll figure it out by the time we get there. Mostly hazelnuts, mostly black locusts and red buds coming out this fall, and a couple of pecan trees. I have like maybe 4. No, I've got 2 in the ground too, so I've got 6 altogether. I got like 6 pecan trees that we can part with. But if you were interested in maybe buying a tree for somebody, get the gift card, give them the gift card, and whenever they're ready to order, they can order. That's a great way to do it. Of course, all year round, we have whatever seeds we have available. And right now, it's bottle gourd and big horse spotted corn. Those are going to be available all year round. Springtime, we're going to have daylilies and possibly some other springtime perennials going forward. And come fall, after the summer heat breaks, we'll go back into some of those perennial plants as well. Next spring, look for cannas coming out. They were supposed to come out this spring, but drought hit us pretty bad, and I was an idiot and didn't water as much as I should have. So let me see. Mary wants me to add this before I sign off. The black locusts want to take over the world. That's right. Be cautious when planting black locusts. They are a very, very vigorous pioneer tree. They have thorns, and they make an excellent security hedge around your property if you're looking for a security hedge. Nobody wants to pass through a thicket of black locust trees, but as a biomass producer, as a nitrogen fixture, as a source of food for pollinators, black locusts are awesome. And if your area doesn't have any, get some. They're good. Just be careful. They do want to take over the world, which means that once you get a few, you will have all you will ever need. They're easy to propagate too. I'll show you how to propagate them. They're great. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you tonight. I hope it's been worth your time. Until then, get out there and get growing, and I'll catch you later.